Thank you for joining us on another episode of Latter-Gay Stories podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Ashworth, and a fascinating episode we have for you today. It's a little bit of a follow-up episode that I have been looking forward to, and maybe a few of you have been looking forward to an update as well. We have on the podcast episode today, Josh and Lolly Weed. That may be a household name that you remember, especially if you are within the LGBTQ LDS world. In 2012, the Weeds released a blog post that shocked the world. In fact, it gained so much national and worldwide attention that people were trying to understand who this Josh Weed was, a gay man, and why his wife, Lolly, was so interested in maintaining and keeping their marriage together. And then a few years later, the Weeds, their journey took them to a point where they announced their divorce, which once again made big headlines. And so today's podcast episode is a follow-up to that experience, and we are really excited to have the Weeds here to discuss where they're at in their journey. The Latter-Gay Stories podcast is made possible through viewers and listeners just like you. If you want to make a difference in helping us create stories and episodes just like this one, we invite you to make a financial contribution to the podcast. There are two simple and easy ways of donating to the Latter-Gay Stories podcast. First, by visiting our website at lattergaystories.org and clicking on the donate link. And from there, you can make a one-time or a monthly donation to help us progress the podcast. Or you can send us a text and text in your donation. Text the word stories, STORIES, to 77948. That's 77948. And your contribution will help us to continue building bigger bridges between the LDS and LGBTQ community through podcast episodes just like this. That aside, let's welcome to the podcast Josh and Lolly Weed. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Excited to have you here.
Excited to be
Yeah,
here.
we are excited.
I have to confess, this interview is a little bit of a, should I say, I shouldn't say personal vendetta.
Vendetta. Wow.
No, it's actually, I'm really excited about doing this interview because so much of the Weeds story paralleled my story.
Oh, yeah.
It paralleled the story of my coming out, my experience with my ex-wife, who we amicably divorced. Mm-hmm. But more importantly than that, it was a story of friendship and companionship and the importance of building family. Mm-hmm. So much of your story related to my experience that when the opportunity arose, I said, I've got to do the interview with the Weeds.
Yeah, totally.
The other part of that is the Latter-Gay Stories community, and maybe we shouldn't just say that community, but the community, the LGBT community, the world, is so interested in what's going on with the Weeds, and they become so interested in what's happening with everybody else's lives.
Sure.
That this interview is probably a little bit of a follow-up.
Yeah.
Because I think there's probably three sections of the Weed experience: that the initial coming out, the middle experience of sharing our story as an update, and then the epilogue.
Yeah.
That
currently in process.
In process.
Right.
Yeah. Still continuing to write our chapters. Mm-hmm. That maybe this is a great time to give the world a follow-up.
Yeah.
And
totally.
let everybody know what's going on in the Weeds world.
Yeah.
But I can't be blamed for sharing the story. You started that.
True.
One fateful evening in Las Vegas.
That's right.
For those who are not fully familiar with the Weed story, tell us a little bit. Tell us how we got to this space, how you gained notoriety in the LGBT world, and why. Why expose a very important but yet special part of your experience with the world?
Okay. You want to take it?
Sure.
Yeah.
It was 2012, and Josh was just not himself, and it just kind of hit me that he needed to start being more authentic. He needed to own who he was, and so we started playing around with the idea of him coming out. Like, we didn't know how.
I was specifically not myself in blog posts. I was writing blog posts, and we were trying to think of the
Yeah, you had writer's
topic.
block.
Yeah, I had writer's block, and she's like, I think that what you really need to do is come out. And it was like, it was so out of left field.
Right, it really was.
And yet felt very like buzzy.
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh, we're supposed to think about this.
Yeah. So we took months to do that, like to come out to our friends and family, and then to write that post. And then we posted it on our 10th anniversary, and it got way more exposure than we were planning on. We just thought, like, our stake will find out, and that will be it. But
local community.
Yeah. When, like, Nightline started calling, and, like, MSNBC, and it was crazy.
The attraction wasn't just that Josh is an incredible writer. The attraction that the media was focusing on was a gay man was married to a woman. And more importantly, or oddly, it seemed to be symbiotic, and the relationship was healthy.
Yeah, this is true. There was some remarkable components. Gay man married to a woman, gay man who was not claiming to be ex-gay. Like, I was not, there was very much a common trope preceding this of ex-gay people being married to women, and like, I'm no longer gay and now I'm married to this woman, and there would be some pretty major publicity around that. But this was like, I think maybe one of the unique features was I was like, no, I'm gay, like, full on, like, this is actually what, this is my full identity, and this relationship we're in is, you used the word healthy, and I actually, like, I'm gonna say I agree with that word. Like, our relationship was visibly, obviously very healthy. Turns out that it being a marital relationship, there needed to be some shifts.
Friendship.
But our relationship, our bond, and our connection was very healthy for sure, and very functional. Our communication was very high, and these things were all things that were very kind of like apparent, and you could see it and feel it, and so it's like, what the heck? I'm sure people were baffled by that. Maybe I remember being shocked that I was like, this is a really it felt like a cliche to me, like, a gay person married to a woman. Welcome to the 1920s. I mean, this is like it has happened so much, and so it was really surprising to me that it got the traction that it got.
Yeah.
Were you surprised because people just saw this as an anomaly, like a circus show, like something that was so odd and unique that they were interested in just seeing it before it left town? Or were people genuinely interested in how you were making it work and the dynamics of the relationship?
The latter. There was some of the former too. Well, the former came in different ways, like I felt the peanut crunching crowd in things like certain TV appearances. Definitely, like, that was more, there were some times where there were people less interested in engaging and more interested in just being like, well, that's weird. Flip the, but my perception was that a lot of people were trying to engage with it. Like, it seemed to be very thought-provoking.
I think too, like, there was a certain population that hadn't even considered that there were gay Mormons in the first place.
Right.
And they hadn't considered that it wasn't a choice. Like, I had friends that told me that when the post came out, they were like, what? I thought you chose to be gay. And so I think there was that population that it hit on.
Absolutely.
And then there was also the population that had gay relatives, and they were like, oh, this is the answer. Do what the weeds did. And so I think that got it a lot of traction.
By far the most problematic population.
That's kind of the avenue that I wanted to venture down for the first part of this interview.
Sure.
Because I think we began to, so I have affectionately called this the weed effect.
I mean, the name works.
I don't recall the people who should attribute the last name to this weed effect.
Totally.
But your story resonated obviously within the Mormon community.
Sure.
Because you were Latter-day Saints who were national attention using experiences through religious upbringing to justify and to also use them as tools to help that relationship work. Mm-hmm. And so the Mormon community was very interested in this because you were one of their own. Mm-hmm. And those people, especially the LGBT Mormon community, looked to the weeds as an example to emulate. Mm-hmm. And if the weeds can make it work, then you can make it work.
Right.
Yeah.
Those words were used by stake presidents, bishops, general authorities, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and coworker who used the weed story as an example of success.
Sure.
How does that make you feel when you think back to that experience, or did you even understand that could be part of the experience when you wrote the blog post?
I think we were very fortunate in how we wrote it, because within it there's a lengthy section about a real disavowal of that notion, like full gainsay of the idea that this is a path people should follow. And in fact, we were really careful to kind of like advocate for the fact that LGBT people are on their own journey, and each one is going to take it the path that is their own, and they need love no matter what path they have chosen, and that this was like our path and what we had chosen. So that was fortuitous, because there was, to answer your question, there was no conception that would be a byproduct, because it probably sounds hard to believe, but like, it is real. We had no idea what this post would do. Like in terms of the number of eyeballs that saw it. So we were writing it very much with a very local audience in mind. I was starting my private practice, so I wanted people that came into my private practice to be aware that I was LGBT, and just, the people in our community to be kind of aware of. We just no longer enshrouded in this privacy that we had been living under. And so we did not foresee that being a byproduct of what we were doing. And it was disturbing. Mm-hmm. It was very disturbing. I felt like our post, even from the very beginning, I felt like our post was being used as a battering ram.
Right. I remember we ran into someone at Sunstone who told us that we were inspiring to them, and so that even though they were gay, they also married a straight person of the opposite gender.
That was
and I was
recently.
So
Yes.
heartbroken
Totally.
for this person. And so, I feel bad, really bad for some of the effects that it had. Mm-hmm. And even looking back at footage that we've done. I mean, that was how long ago? Can I do math? 7 years ago. And so I look back at some of that footage, and I'm like, I cringe a little bit about some of the things that we ourselves were believing and thinking.
Yeah.
But I have since come to realize we have to have compassion for our previous selves too, our former selves, that we're on a journey too.
Right.
And I'm just hoping that people have had compassion for us as we've learned and grown and changed.
The more cringy parts, the cringiest things are seeing denial. Whenever we as human beings see denial in our former selves, it's you're gonna see the light on that idea. But but yeah, anytime for a number, Wally and I, after the post, began a lengthy journey of advocacy, really. It was funny because like the post just did this thing and took a life of its own, and almost immediately we were kind of like, but wait, like stop using our like don't do that.
Caveat.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's like you can't. Even though we spent literally years, pretty much any speaking engagement we went to, trying to like communicate the message, like stop using our story in this way, et cetera, like you don't choose virality. And so like that message just didn't have it never had the same proliferation. And so which was why it was important for us to be taking that message for such a long time.
So as you brought up the fact that you began speaking and kind of hit the circuit a little, just among LGBT circles, as people wanted to understand and hear your story. What were the questions people were asking you? What were they most interested in when the weeds were called to speak? And what was the audience interaction?
How to be good parents was a big one.
I remember a young kid
Yes.
came up and said, "I'm gay. What kind of a woman should I look for to marry?" And
Already we were like,
I just didn't even know what to say at the time, because his parents were there, like, and they were so hopeful, and
Totally.
it just broke my heart. Yeah, I think a lot of people, a big question is, how do you make that work? Like,
right.
and also people like, are you really sexually attracted to, I could think of like,
Yeah.
are you
really gay, or
gay?
are you really sexually attracted to your wife?
Yeah.
Which are kind of complex questions to even answer in that kind of form, especially the are you sexually attracted to your wife? Like, in my case, I didn't know what being sexually attracted to another person actually was, because I had never actually experienced it. So as far as I knew at the time, I was like, yeah, I mean, we have sex, so sure, and like
she's gorgeous.
and don't you think, I mean, look at this sassy, like, it's like very gay assessment, like she's bringing it and I love it. Yeah, like,
So I am polysexual.
so attracted, and it's like attracted means drawn to, and yeah, but like I was not being duplicitous. At no point was there ever an intentional like deception, but I was in denial of certain things. And when you don't know the truth for yourself, if you're trying to communicate your truth, you're going to communicate that lapse.
Like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that was it. Like, you really had never
I just didn't
never
know
experienced
what
that.
love was. And then when I did finally experience it, I was like, oh, okay.
Romantic
I know.
love, because
yeah, romantic
we do
love. Oh,
love
our
each
love
other,
is like very apparent even at this moment. Like, let's be real. Like, it's so just like we
Yes.
really are very connected and always have been. But I was gonna say that like it is so easy to look back in a 7-year sequence and like be critical, either self-critical or critical of others, when in fact, I think that part of what, and I do that too, like whoever the new person that has a tweet from like 2007 that has some like legitimately problematic stuff of whatever nature, and I think people have a lot of reaction to that without really, really reflecting on the fact that they also went through a journey of understanding. I think in our culture in general, not even Mormon culture, maybe even American culture, there is a phenomenon happening of either more further entrenchment into denial around issues of social justice and differing populations and otherness. So people are either going, not to get political, but the Trump route, or like the MAGA route, or like a more conservative, more nationalistic route. But by the same token, I feel like other populations, there is a general flow of deepening understanding of LGBT issues, of issues of race, of feminist issues, just kind of in general, and getting woke. Wokeness is happening. And once you're woke, it's as if you didn't know what you didn't know. It's as if you never didn't. It's as if you never. How do you say this sentence? It's like you always knew what you know. You've always known, but like you didn't always know. And so, and I feel like our post intersected with and maybe even kind of was part of a catalyst to a real awakening within Mormonism around, or it just at least was adjacent to or simultaneous with a real awakening in Mormonism around LGBT issues. And so, like, we were all kind of in the dark, and then this post happened, and everyone's like talking about it, and there's like this conversation that's flowing, and there's a journey attached to that, and for sure.
We were taking a journey too.
We were on that same journey. Yeah.
It indeed was I understand this. It indeed was the perfect storm where there were real people, real faces attached to a story similar to yours, but yet they had no spotlight. They just were well known within congregations or families.
Right.
And everyone was looking for a spokesperson, someone who had a track record, history, experience.
Right.
And then the weeds show up. And
right.
I think there was an element of his, and maybe you disagree, but I wonder if there was an element of leadership in the church who also was, and I'm not saying general, but maybe even local leadership who was very interested in seeing success stories to justify their teachings, their claims. And maybe that was another reason why within Mormonism the weed story took off. It was another opportunity to say, see, there is a story that justifies the message.
I think it got there for sure. What were you going to say?
And I just think that there was this problem, there's the problem with the LGBT community. What do we do with them?
That was what church PR.
Yeah.
The church PR was like, we've been wrestling with the question of, can there be a gay Mormon for like 2 years? And now here you are. This is what they said to us.
So I think it brought a lot of people peace because they were like, oh, here's a nice box.
Like,
we will put the LGBT people.
People were feeling the same level of the conflict that people are feeling around the policy and around just like this issue in general within Mormonism. It was, people were already feeling that and not knowing what to do with it, and there's this discomfort with like, how does the church jive? Like, I believe in the church, but I know people who are gay and it's not working. And we were this fresh, clean-cut couple of faces that like, yay, they fill this gap. But then we would be invited to speak, and we were not necessarily saying that we had at times people were not really huge fans of what we actually had to say, So there was this idea of what we were and what we represented that was more soundbitey, and then what we were actually saying, either in the post itself or in speaking engagements. Which is not to say that we were always perfectly on point in our messaging throughout the years, but there was usually a pretty big divergence between what people were hoping we would say and what we were actually listen, here's what's up.
Let's talk about the evolution of that message. So immediately, and I think the listeners will completely understand exactly what you're saying in terms of the post goes viral. Mm-hmm. You reel back a little and say, oh, maybe we should have edited this, or this has now been taken out of context a little bit.
Actually, the post itself, we felt really comfortable with at the time. Is that fair to say? It had all the elements we wanted it to have for virality. We just didn't know how it was going to go viral. We were oh, good thing we said things as clearly and.
And I think people didn't read it all.
People, it's almost as if they didn't read it, honestly. It's almost as if many of the people were just hearing the headline and just reacting to this idea without actually engaging with all of the concepts. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. So if the message, as you say, evolved, when you hit the circuit and we're speaking to these different groups, what part of that message was different from the original post to, and was it a result of maybe visiting with church PR a little and massaging the message a little, or your experience? So how did the message evolve from?
The evolution was purely, as far as I see it, was purely around the culmination of both us gaining further understanding and further exposure of other gay stories, because we didn't have much exposure before our own was out there. We didn't know a lot of LGBT people. So gaining further understanding and like deeper empathy with other people in the church who were LGBT, and understanding the precarious nature of mixed orientation marriage, both of our own and others over time.
Right.
And kind of like, and seeing, but like most of all, it was this, just watching the way our story was used, that facilitated an like, so at the beginning, the message of like people, you know, it was like, we're doing this marriage and here's all these things and here are these questions you might have about our marriage, you know, and like, because it was meant for people that knew us, right? And then there was these little sections about like, you know, people get to choose different paths and don't use this, but it was a smaller portion of what we were saying in the initial post. And then as years passed, it was like, by the end, we did this fireside in California where it was like, hi, don't do mixed orientation marriages, thanks, bye.
Right.
Like it was like we were getting done.
Oh yeah, I think, yeah, I remember that fireside that we did
Yes.
in the San Francisco area, and just feeling like the main message I needed to share was
Yes.
how hard
it
that marriage was for me.
Right.
Because I just thought people need to know this.
Right.
And so
And it had gotten harder.
It had gotten harder.
Yeah.
Like our
own denial mechanisms were being stripped away, and so the marriage was becoming more difficult.
for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Like I went to grad school and became a therapist too, and we met tons of LGBT,
right,
wonderful, amazing people, and
who were being very hurt, very, very, very hurt, and just kind of this overall sense of like, no, there is a problem. Like a growing sense of like the problem of the church's stance, like there's being something very wrong.
You know, I think it is interesting too, because before, when it was just me and you,
Right.
it was like, okay, well, we can do this.
Totally.
You know, we can handle it. We can do this. But then when we started seeing it hurting other people,
Right.
it was suddenly like, well, this is not okay. Like.
Right. We were willing to sacrifice
Right.
ourselves.
And I think that's how it was near the end, is that Josh was like, so you were like, you should go and be your authentic self.
Right.
And that was the thing you wanted to share with everyone. But I can't. Like,
Right.
you were like, I can't do that. But I hope that for
I have
everyone
been asked
else.
kind of by God not to do that, but like that is what I hope for all other people. You know, understanding there are variations or whatever, but like, yeah, like it is interesting because, and yeah, definitely more of a timbre of like at the beginning of like, this is working so well, and emphasizing the things that were working well because of the message that we were sharing at the time was like, hi community, we're here and we're doing this thing and it's going well for us, so mind your own business, and you know, kind of like here's this thing, but like also like don't assume it's a tragedy because we're doing okay, you know, like the intentions around that initial post were just so different than what ended up happening with it, and we're very much more around like it was not, the emphasis was not going to be around like this is what's hard, because it's
Right.
it had a completely different purpose in terms of most gay people, most LGBT people, when they come out, they're not, you know, they're not like, these are the hardest parts of my life and I'm coming out, you know, like you're coming out, so you're kind of like catering to an audience that might not be like super ready to hear what you're having to say, and yeah, so then by the end it was like, no, like here is what it's like let's emphasize the difficulty, like stop telling your kids to do this.
Stop telling them to enter into mixed
marriages. Like,
yeah.
this is not something we are not promoting this. We are officially not recommending this path.
Right. I think too, like, as a therapist, watching a client go through a journey and helping them to become self-actualized and seeing the beauty of that.
Right.
And then being like, I wish I could do that. Like,
totally.
It's really an interesting experience.
It is very kind of surreal. And also, like, because our thing was like, we felt very like, we felt called to do what we were doing, always.
Yeah, I don't regret anything.
It was never like, it's just hard to we just didn't know yet, like, what we were going to be led to do. And so
the theme feels like this is as in many things that favor the human experience, it was a line upon line, precept upon precept,
for sure,
stepping stone to stepping stone experience.
Absolutely.
And the thing that the world didn't grant the weeds was the ability to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, refine, define, and allow your world to progress and evolve and unfold. And maybe it did. It's just the fact that the spotlight was there.
Right.
It was so willing to highlight all of the nuances and difficult parts of your journey. And I do believe that there were conflicting groups who were interested in your story.
For sure.
One group who, as we've discussed on the podcast, who were using the weeds as an example of mixed orientation marriages that work. Another group who were waiting for the weeds to stumble and fall so they could prove that mixed orientation marriages wouldn't work.
Right.
Like, how horrible are both of those stances? Like, really, like, it's so funny to, like, you better make it through because I have vested interest versus, like, enjoy the stumble when it happens.
Isn't that human culture? Isn't that what we see?
It is human nature, for sure.
And you see that in the tabloids, you see it in so much of culture that is the scenario that we've created. And you brought up politics earlier. We see that in politics as well. So I don't believe that your story was immune to
of course not.
That experience.
Yeah.
And that maybe explains a little bit about it. Let's open and unwrap Pandora's box a little bit in terms of how you individually were treated by society. And because I know this wasn't an easy course, immediately Lolly was seen as the victim.
Oh, you mean after the decision to divorce?
Through the whole
thing.
Through the whole experience, because of course Lolly is not getting what she bargained for.
Sure.
She's married to a gay man, and for those who initially didn't understand Josh's story, the fact that you were very open about your sexuality prior to you even getting married.
Right.
So let's just talk a little bit about the victim card, the responses that you received from the community, these polar communities, and how that impacted your individual experiences.
Wow, that's really big. I did feel a lot of people like pitying me, and I did not like that.
They were like surprised at how pretty you were.
Oh, right. That was weird for me.
That was so funny. Yeah.
Is that people would be like, "What? She's married to a gay guy. I thought she would be ugly." Like she had to settle because she didn't think she could get anybody else. And that actually was very damaging for me, because then I was like, wait a minute, people are judging the quality of my relationship based on how I look.
Right.
And proceed to me eating like it was weird. I gained a bunch of weight that I'm still like trying to get rid of, and I saw on social media like, oh well, they're gaining weight, so obviously they're not happy in their marriage, and so that's just weird to have people judging my relationship based on my looks. That was, and then to have people pitying me too, and thinking that Josh was using me, like as a baby maker, kind of like fulfilling his own destiny by, you know, roping me in. I heard that a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because on a really systemic level, I feel like almost that is accurate. Like, even though we had a lot of, there was no, you know, we both went into it very eyes wide open, but they were eyes that were very, very stuck within the culture they had been raised in.
Eyes wide open with Mormon glasses on.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Blinders, restricted, tunnel vision.
Yeah,
for sure.
I get it. Yeah,
But,
completely.
Eyes were open.
We were looking at each other very clear, you know, so it wasn't like I roped Lolly into anything. But yeah, I wanted to have a wife and children like I was told I was supposed to have, and that required a marriage to a woman that was willing to do that. And so, like, there was a level to which that, you know, so like people would say those things and it would be like, well, that's not really true. But then there's also this little nagging, like, well, it kind of is. There's a little bit of truth to that idea. That because of the system, you know, not individually we did this thing, but systemically, yeah, that's kind of what was happening.
I remember saying this at one point, like, I chose to marry you because I love you.
Right.
And you chose to marry me because that was what you thought God wanted you to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, the best choice.
And then I would always be like, well, no, you knew God wanted you to marry me, and I knew God wanted me to marry you, which on a very real level was true. But also what you just said was simultaneously true. So there's like a complexity to it all.
Yeah, and I completely understand your position, being closeted, married, father. And you and I have had this conversation in the past about mission, marriage, children. It's that seemed to have been the great Mormon message.
Yeah.
You serve an honorable mission. You fulfill your callings. You attend temple. You invest so much into religion. You get married. You have children. Slowly, if these feelings exist within you today, they will disappear because you'll be so fully invested in these new adventures that you won't have to worry about it any longer.
Sure.
And those are difficult to understand, in addition to people who enter into mixed orientation marriages being completely chaste and celibate, not knowing the alternatives.
Correct.
And so those two scenarios, the one that says, I don't really know that I'm gay because I've never had sex. I've never experienced that part of my sexuality.
Right.
Therefore, I get married, sealed in the temple, lots of family commitment, great amount of Mormon pressure, and then I find out on my wedding night and the week after and the 2 months and 3 years and that I'm indebted into something that is difficult to leave at this point. So you have that group. And then you have those who believe that my sexuality, and I hate to say will fix or change, as much as I want to say becomes a shadow, is put back into behind the curtain to allow Act 2 and Act 3 and Act 4 to happen.
Yeah.
So I understand that. I get that part of that message. And January 2018 rolls around, and you're back at the computer blogging again.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the events that led up to the unicorn who turns into a bat.
Take it away. Where do we start?
Wow.
So you're saying it was Lolly's fault.
Yeah, good one.
I think that it was just a lot of events that built upon each other. But one thing was, like, Josh's mom passed away. She passed away from early onset Alzheimer's, and so we had been watching her slowly die, and it was so painful to watch. And I think when she passed away, you were in such grief.
Yes.
And
deep bereavement.
And that, I think, played a role in it. Not a complete role, but like all the things that we've said before, like having met so many people and
kind of the thing you were saying about like, we want this authenticity for everyone else, but like also that's when it was so hard for us because we were in this marriage and it was like, wow, this is like profoundly painful to like sit in the actual pain where Lolly would express the damage this was doing to her, and then I would at times also express the damage that our situation was doing to me, and both kind of like really not running from that pain, not hiding it, not anesthetizing it really at all. And it was rough.
It was rough. I mean, our like intimacy in marriage was always something that we felt was important.
Sexual?
Sexual intimacy. And then like there just became a point where Josh couldn't do it anymore.
Like, it was actually my mom's death, which is an attachment event. So from an attachment standpoint, that kind of does make sense. But we weren't anticipating that, being the case.
And like, I remember Josh saying, will you be okay if we like were never to have sex again?
Yeah.
And that like broke my heart. Right. And I was like, I really don't want to be in a sexless marriage.
Why though?
It's a wonderful institution.
Yes. And he just, you were just so depressed.
Yeah, which is weird because for the LGBT person, they are and always have been in a sexless marriage in a way, Mm-hmm. But yeah, totally. So anyway, all of these kinds of factors were culminating, and then I had my fated experience at a writing retreat thing with a dear friend of mine, and I watched her fall in love, and kind of like, I mean, it's not like I hadn't had this thought 1,000 times, but for some reason, what it was that she was falling in love, and we got back to the house, and they went to like go. They had just met in person. She and this other person.
She's gay.
She's gay. Yeah. Oh yeah. She's a lesbian.
Would kind of be an important part of the story.
Yeah.
Thanks,
That's why I
Josh.
should include the fact that she is a lesbian, and she.
So you head down to Florida.
Yeah, I'm in Florida for this event, this thing, and she is falling in love with a woman, and it kind of, and like then we all got back to the house. We had been swimming in the beach, and they ditched me, which I knew was gonna, that's gonna happen, and you're almost hoping it. And it's like, yeah, go do your thing, like go get them, And
don't mind me, I'm just the third wheel.
I know, it was very third wheel, but I was like, and I had I was the one that get over here, kind of got them holding hands and stuff, and so it was I was there for it. It was a very sweet thing to be watching. But then, and then I was just kind of doing my thing, writing some stuff, or maybe writing my journal or something. And then she sent me a text and was like, I'm so, at midnight, I'm so sorry we never got back over there, because we were at different wings of the place we were staying in. And it felt so similar to how I used to feel in high school when straight people, we would be at a social thing, and then they would kind of not want me around, not because they didn't want me around, but they're having this romance thing, and I was not a part of that, and so they got to go do this thing that I couldn't do because it was bad and wrong back then, and now I didn't even think it was bad and wrong. It was really awesome, and I was just I have never been the one having that experience, and I was like, is that true? Have I never? And it was almost it was so funny. I scoured my brain trying to find have I ever? And it was no, I never really had a person in proximity that was happening with. And
you mean a crush, and they crushed on you back?
They crush on your back, and you're having this simultaneous experience of the feelings culminating. And for whatever reason, in that instant, it was just, the denial was gone. I had that thought many times, but if denial's there, it's just well, but it's fine because I have the whatever we say to ourselves. But that night it was like raw. It was just like, actually, no, it just is not okay. Like on a very fundamental human level, this is wrong. I need to be able to have this experience. I'm saying, you're putting to language certain feelings that you have. Those feelings aren't languaged, right? So I wasn't that night saying things like definitively, like I need to have this experience, but just like it was a feeling, like an urgency. And came home from that experience, and then Lolly and I had some really difficult conversations. I showed her my journal from that experience, which was very disturbing. I dropped the journal and handed it to her, had her read it, and then my brain was like, back to denial. I went to work the next day. What I had shared in the journal was basically a polemic, like full on, just like, this is not okay, I am not okay, and what the circumstance I have been brought up in here is not okay, and the church's stance is 100% not okay. None of this is okay, and I'm not sure what to do about it, but it is like not cool. And I mean, I don't know how to sum it up better than that, but like, and then I drop that, I'd like drop it on her. She reads it, I go to work the next day and jump right into denial. I'm seeing my clients all day. By the end of the day, I'm like back to old me. Like, I'm like, okay, let's keep going.
Let's have family home evening.
Let's go do our family home evening. Lolly's like,
no.
What?
That journal, in the journal, it said, like, I realized that I've never loved anyone.
Right.
And for me to read that, like, was so hard.
Totally.
And so when he came back and was like, totally fine, I was like, wait a minute. Like, how can you write all of that down? I was like, last night was the worst night of my life. And we're just going to move on.
And I'm kind of like, this is what I've been having to do all. It was not news. It was not new for me. Like,
what were those feelings going through your mind, Lolly? You say, you've never loved me.
Right. It was, going into the marriage, I was like, okay, you're not like sexually attracted to me the way you would be to a man, but there's still some attractions, which now we understand was not really even a thing.
Yeah.
But I always thought, well, at least you have like a romantic love for me. Like maybe it's not sexual, but it's a romantic, sweet connection. And I thought that for years of our marriage. Like,
totally.
2012 post, I still was thinking that.
We were in it.
Like, he at least, he loves me romantically.
Yes.
And then to sit there with that realization, like, wait a minute, no, you never even loved me romantically? It was more like, what, like a sister? Like,
What even was it?
Yeah, because it was heartbreaking. Like,
so maybe to better understand, so what I'm hearing is you go to this event, you see what flourishes and creates or becomes a authentic and symbiotic relationship between two people, as if these are multiple Legos that individually are something and individually are valuable and worthy and an element, but become something completely different when conjoined. And that is built into something new when they are used together. And so I completely understand this side of it where these elements of love and connection existed in a relationship.
Right.
Mine was the same way.
right.
But then when you assemble those as they properly were assembled,
Right.
they create something new.
Yeah.
It's not just a bag of Legos anymore.
Right.
It's a creation. It's something that functions and works and
Right.
brings joy and was intended to be created this way.
Yeah.
All the elements were there. All the correct pieces,
Right.
when assembled properly, become something new. And so I understand that had to hurt. That had to be a difficult experience, knowing that you were just a piece of that assembly.
Right. Right. It was so painful. I literally kept thinking, I feel like I'm in a nightmare, like a literal nightmare. I'm gonna wake up sometime, like this can't be true, like this can't be me and Josh, like we love each other, like it was always supposed to be me and you, like so it felt like a nightmare.
It just felt like we had been guided to the marriage, so it just took a lot for the universe to be able to like nudge us into like maybe consider that, you know, like now it seems so clear, but at the time it was like really difficult to get there.
But I think the only thing that got us there to actually think, but maybe we could end our marriage, was the idea that we could still be a family, like that
we were like bawling in each other's arms even at the idea of separation.
What was the catalyst at the claim jumper?
I remember asking Josh if what it would take for him to love himself as a gay man. And he just sat there and thought about it, and then he said, I don't think I can love myself as a gay man unless I'm a gay man. Like, I allow myself to be what I am.
I felt so novel.
Yeah.
And it seems to me so rudimentary now,
but both of us were like,
right, that's so true.
Was that question directed to Josh as his wife or as a therapist?
Oh, it was a therapist question. Yeah. Very much so. Because I was studying narrative therapy at the time, and I was honestly stepping back and being like, if he were my client, what would I ask him?
Were you doing that? Because I remember that that was at the not behest, but like Wesley had gotten a thing for you and a thing for me. And the thing for me was that, like, Josh needs to love himself.
Yeah, but in that particular conversation,
moment, you were like,
I remember
going the narrative route. Oh, that's hilarious.
Thinking, yeah, like,
good thing you did. It opened up a very important vein.
So this is really interesting territory in my world as well, because as my wife and I were facing this very question, whether or not there should be a divorce. Almost verbatim, she said, "What do you see yourself happy in 5 years?" And I had to look inside to say, well, what does happiness mean? Does happiness? I've had happy experiences in my relationship. And when I couldn't really formulate a great answer, she pushed a little further to say, do you see yourself happy in 10 years? Yeah. I correlated that with my 10 years of marriage already and said, again, there's been general happiness, but I don't understand what this happiness could look like because I'm not fully authentic right now.
Right.
I am not who I... So maybe this is a word to the wise. If you want to continue progressing your relationship or maybe allowing it to remain stagnant, don't ask these questions. Don't ask questions about happiness.
Don't actually face your feelings.
Right.
Because it was that very question that said, when I said, no, I don't know that I can understand full happiness being married to a woman, that we're in a mixed orientation marriage.
Yeah.
Portions of happiness, yes.
Right.
Portions of our relationship that work without issue, yes. Full happiness, I can't tell you. Just like as we talked about earlier in the podcast, it's difficult for me to articulate what exists on the other side of the aisle, having never ventured on the other side of the aisle.
Sure.
And having no experience on that side of the aisle.
And that's, honestly, for me, it was very similar because my high school boyfriend was gay.
It's true.
Not him. It was a different one. So, when you've only kissed 2 gay men and that was all, like, I didn't have anything to compare it to either. So we
did not have a huge frame of reference.
No, we're not only were we 2 virgins, neither one of us had kissed a man.
I'm hoping
a straight man.
I hadn't kissed a straight man. You hadn't kissed a man.
I'm hoping Josh is vetting all of your future dates to say this one's gay, stay away.
I have not. You have not fallen into that trap, but there is.
I did have someone.
Oh, that's right.
I did have someone on one of the LDS dating apps message me who was gay, wanting to date me. And
we're like, what are you doing?
I was like, are you
for
did you not read my bio there? Like,
He's like,
no.
I just think you would like maybe be able to understand me and what I'm going on. Like,
I had to kindly decline.
Swiped.
Yes.
Seriously.
I'm like, no, I will never enter a mixed orientation marriage again. It was so sad.
Pass.
So you pull out of the parking lot at the Claim Jumper. Where does your story go from there? How quickly does this unfold?
Like an hour.
It was fast.
It was real fast.
It was that night, the Claim Jumper night.
That was a big night. It was October 7th, 6th, 2017.
And it was just like, I think what I was trying to do was I was thinking about how he was having a hard time loving himself.
Yeah, this was important.
And I was trying to validate that for him, and just saying, you know what, Josh, like, I had pretty good self-esteem growing up, like, and I had all these positive things, like I was doing the right thing, like my family loved me,
the community
supporting me, you know, and I had all the good things going for me. I was like, and even with all of that, our marriage has pretty much ground me down to like a nub of a person. And my point in saying that was to say, and you love me. Right. But this relationship has damaged me so deeply that I can't imagine what society and everyone around you has done to you.
Right. But when she said that, like when she said, our marriage has ground me down to a nub, I was like, it's the same phenomenon where when it's for yourself, you're kind of like, but I mean, I can take it. I can take hard things. But when she said that and put it that way, I had a kind of a flash forward of like, okay, it's been 15 years. Like, if she's already ground to a nub of a person, what is 10, 20, 30, 40 more years of that going to do to her? And that was when I was like, we're done. Like, I'm not going to watch you do that. Like,
do you see yourself happy in 5 years? Do you see yourself happy in 10 years?
Same question.
Yeah, I get it.
And so she was like, I mean, that was probably the moment of fully being like, I guess we're doing this. And then we were like weeping into each other's arms on the couch. It was so sad.
It was so, like, to look at each other and be like, I love you.
Because we had been through such beautiful things, thinking of like taking our kids home. Like, our marriage was super beautiful and good. Like, has been like lovely in so many ways. So sweet.
Like our babies, like, you know.
So many hopes and dreams.
We had made this family together.
Exactly.
And I loved our family, and so it was just like this
tender moments.
What are we gonna do?
Unthinkable. I remember we had to go in. We were crying in the car, and we had to go in because I had so much snot coming out of my face because I was crying so hard.
Yeah.
And we were like, let's move this party into the house.
Yeah, it was really gross.
It was gnarly. Like, it was a very, very difficult conversation. So then we're holding each other on the couch. And that's when the homestead idea came, which was I had given her a blessing like a year before that had said, soon you will be in your homestead. And it felt very real and legit. And Molly was like, what about the homestead blessing? Here we are talking about like cutting ties, severing ties. And she was like, what about that blessing that mentioned homestead? And then it like dawned on me, like, a homestead is 160 acres. Like, it's not a house, it's like a prop. It's like, we can have a homestead. Like, we can polygamy this up. Like, we come from like polygamists. Like, we're gonna, you know, like, as we talk it through, communal living and like having multiple people in a household, in a family system that, but without the misogyny. It's like, without the misogyny and without the like, gross patriarchy stuff.
I was like, this is like polygamy, but way better for
Way
me.
better for you,
Because I get to live with 3 men.
Totally.
Like, so much better.
So it was like, but I mean, so like all joking aside, at that moment, that was the most peace-giving moment. Like, it felt very kind of like, just, we couldn't have done, I don't know, I honestly do not know if we could have done it if we had been forced to think of it in a different way.
Like a traditional divorce.
In a traditional divorce kind of way.
I don't think we could have done it.
I almost don't think we could have done that. But this allowed us to, it just felt very right, and it allowed us to, we didn't want, we were like, but I don't want to lose you. It was very like sweet. Actually.
The very real parts of divorce.
Yeah.
This separation.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we get some separation and anxiety, betrayal, trauma, all these things that are building in this bucket that now has to be laid out on the table and sorted through.
Sure.
One issue at a time.
Not so much betrayal. Well, did you feel betrayal? I didn't feel any betrayal by you.
I don't know. It wasn't, I don't, not necessarily by you,
Right.
but.
Maybe by the institutions.
Right. Just like that I had been willing to sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
for this, and then
To have it not.
to have it like disintegrate was,
Tough.
yeah. And I think it was more like the church, like.
Right.
Which I absolutely believe that is the religious element to this, which I think is part of a large portion of, or maybe even the foundation of this whole experience.
Yeah.
Was the religious aspect to it.
Sure.
This quest that if I do X, Y, and Z, the end is exaltation and eternal life
Sure.
and happiness.
Sure.
That is all the answers.
And for us
or-
it was
or maybe no.
that's exactly true. And then for us it was also like there was that very systemic institutional level, and then there was also the very personal relationship with God level of like we knew we were supposed to do what we had done, so it was like, wait, what? You're changing the game a little bit here.
So you announced to the world that you're divorcing,
So yeah,
and it's Paul Revere territory. It shot heard around the world. The start of the revolution.
right.
That was a viral post. If the first one was viral, this one was viral.
Well, first one was way more viral actually.
Really?
Yeah. The first post was like national viral.
True. And
This one was like Mormon. We're becoming very acquainted with virality through the years. So like this one was like so it's several months later, right? We had already been processing through. We had already done the thing where we kept like feeling like, I mean, it just seems so unreal. We're like, are we sure we're supposed to do this? And kept having to have spiritual confirmation. So we would like pray and fast and ask, and there were lots of really clear indicators that this is what we were supposed to be doing, because it was just so weird.
Yeah, like I went to the temple and prayed about it and was like, Heavenly Father, like.
And I did not, because on that night, felt very differentiated from the institutional church. I felt like I had never been invited. This is just a little detail to throw in there. I had felt like I had never been accepted or invited by the institutional church to the table, really. And so
If you were going to be
if I was my real self, which I clearly felt God was asking me to do, and it was like, oh, they've only ever accepted me insofar as I was willing to
if you were living a straight
life and
then
being
you were
the broken
accepted.
straight, then they would accept me. But me as me, they would not. And so I felt a really large distance from the institutional church, and I even like went in and gave my temple recommend back to the bishop, and like it was very like I just felt very distinct from the institution, and I mentioned that's why I wasn't at the temple with so Lolly very purposefully went to the temple to ask that question, and every time we asked, it was really clear that we were doing the thing we were supposed to do. And in some ways, in reference to our original 2012 post, there was actually some relief, because it's like
no more pressure.
Well, yes. Well, no, because there's still a lot of pressure. But like, I mean, it was like actually going to be more pressure in some ways, right? But relief to be able to be like, because it felt like for years the message was like, don't go into mixed orientation marriage like this marriage that we're in that is functioning. You know, like it just felt like there was not, it felt like our words and our actions weren't lining up, even
Right.
though we really meant those words and we were very intentional in our actions too. But this was like, look, it was like if there was ever going to be a nail in the coffin of like people spreading our story and using us to manipulate other LGBT people, this was it. Like it felt very clear that we had to make a public statement about our divorce. Because it would have been very easy to kind of like silently just like scurry into like but like it was super clear that we were supposed to just like compose a post and make it very apparent.
Felt like we owed it to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Did you feel an obligation to people to tie the bow and
I mean,
put the present
absolutely.
away, or
Yeah.
was there an element that maybe we are delegitimizing this experience by continuing it? And I guess that's back in your world. What compelled you to say society deserved to know what was happening?
Oh, that's a really good question. I just felt like people needed to know that it didn't work for us. Like we tried and
Right.
we loved each other and were open with each other and tried our very best, and that when people were using it and saying, look, this is what you should do, that it was like, no, we can't allow people to use at least our story that way anymore.
And you've been very clear. I want to throw this in just as an aside. Some critics will argue you didn't try hard enough. Maybe you weren't.
Wait, try hard enough to what?
So let's say
In the marriage or to
religious in a religious aspect.
Yeah.
Well, if they would have just hung on a little longer, we all need to experience trials of our faith.
Right.
If we all just ran away from our problems, because this seems exactly the perfect storm scenario where the weeds are just, now it's gotten difficult, and now they're just cutting and running. But we've discussed this in other forums where you were adamant. We were the family home evening family.
For sure.
The scripture reading family. The praying family.
There was not some other thing bubbling up. There was not some like, it's not that there was like some other issue specifically. Like there was like no, and I mean this is what people always ask. Like they're like, oh, he met a dude and like whatever. I was like, no. Like there was nothing else happening. Like,
there was no wrecking ball that
there was no wrecking ball.
The marriage that it would have been easier to say this
happened,
infidelity.
In fact, if anything, it was the weirdest thing ever to be like. It was almost hard to describe what did happen.
Right,
Like it was almost like I wanted to be able to point to some event and be like, this is when it all like unraveled. But even in retelling it right now, it's like, well, on this day, this, and then this led to this. It's like this very like led thing, and.
But we really were doing everything we possibly could do. Like individual scripture study, individual prayer, family scripture study, family prayer.
Mormon stuff.
Yes, everything. Going to the temple.
We were very diligent. I think that's why it was so. I think that was why it was so surprising, and so powerfully. Like moving and significant that this is where the Lord took us. To me, like I was like we gave every opportunity for God to be like, do it, like keep going, like, and He kind of is the one that finally got us to see what He was wanting us to see, and it was like it came as a great surprise, Like I was very, very shocked that this is what the outcome was. I was like, I can't believe this is what, it was like this was His answer for us, and I cannot believe this is what He wanted us to do.
Because neither of you were working towards this outcome.
No.
Everything about your relationship and experience was keeping it together.
Yeah.
Right.
And we were good at keeping it together. We arguably could have lasted so, I mean, this was not a change born of emergency. This was not a change born of like trauma. This was a change born of being led to enact a change.
You say that as the methodic institution of marriage.
Mm-hmm. We could have continued in the methodical, like, we had all of the therapeutic tools to continue a semi-viable, really, really profoundly difficult and ultimately dangerous, because I did have some suicidal ideation that would crop up. So, like, probably not worth the danger, right? Again, I almost feel like not recommending this idea, right? But, like, we probably could have kept going with it for a really long time in terms of, like, the resources we had.
And we loved each other.
And, like, actual love, not romantic love, but in terms of, like affectionate love and devotion and...
Right. I mean, that was like the ultimate question. Like, do we love each other so much we stay, or do we love each other so much that we let each other go?
You give each other the opportunity to love and be loved.
Right.
I remember in a mixed orientation Facebook group that I'm part of, a straight spouse who was in this group made a comment. She had a difficult time watching the divorce between her and her husband. She's the straight spouse, her husband was the gay spouse. They divorced, and it was really difficult because they were in this space as well. Great marriage, symbiotic and compatible, and difficult but manageable. And they were seeing the fruits of their experience together. She, as they divorced, for the first time, starts dating 3 years after their marriage, after their divorce. She begins dating. She makes a comment that I have thought about over and over again, and she said, I didn't realize why my husband needed to date me until I entered into my first relationship where I was loved by a man completely.
Yeah, right.
The feeling that she felt in that relationship for the first time, she said that experience helped me to understand why my husband had to divorce me.
Right.
Does that make sense in your relationship?
Oh, totally.
It was very interesting because I met Carlos in December online. We met in person in January, and this all had happened in October. So a month before the post we posted, I had already started talking to Carlos, but he and I were very methodical. He's like a very methodical person, so it was like a very slow process. But but essentially, as Lolly was disentangling herself from the love emotion that she felt for me, the romantic attachment that she had for me, I was simultaneously, for the first time, falling in love. And it was really, like, poignant to understand for the first time what she had been trying to give me. Because I had all these feelings for him that I was like, that were so special and just so, like, it's really a beautiful process. The whole human, like, falling in love with each other thing is, like, really lovely. And you just have these feelings, especially during, like, the limerence infatuation phase. There's just, like, this, the affection, the level of affection and your desires for that person and your hopes for them, and you just want what's best for them, and they're just like this. There's a specialness to that bond, and that continues even after infatuation and stuff. There is a continuation of it. And anyway, so I'm like feeling these things for the first time and realizing, oh, this is what she was trying to give me, and she was feeling these tender things I'm feeling for him. This is what she was feeling for me the whole time, and I could not reciprocate those. And I remember having this very clear vision of her, because it had been very special to me to belong to her and for her to belong to me, but it was not the way it needed to be. And so I had this very clear vision of, like, she was, like, offering me this gift of those types of affection, those types of feelings, and I was deaf to it. And I can't remember the imagery either, but, like, it was just piling up, and she was feeling the weight of not having that taken in. I couldn't take it in, and I couldn't reciprocate it. It wasn't that I just that I couldn't reciprocate it. I also did not know what she was giving me, and to learn what that was and watch it as she's, like, having to detach. I mean, it was really painful and also very sweet to finally understand like the gift that she had been trying to give me. I mean, I bawled because I was so sad that I was there. I love Carlos, but and I'm happy to be where I am. But I had really wanted to be able to accept that from Lolly. Like that was what we had tried to do, and to not have been able to do that was brutal.
Right. And at the same time, like watching him date and seeing how he was, I was like, oh, he never felt that way for me.
Right.
He never felt that way. And he wrote me an email saying this stuff, like, I realize now what you were giving me, and you should have been receiving it back.
Right.
And so years and years of like pretty much unrequited love,
ultimately,
it takes its toll. And I was just getting depleted and not getting that love back. And then to see him fall in love with someone else, that whole process was very interesting. And I almost had to come to this point where he had said, I'm giving your love back to you, Lolly.
I was bawling, but I was like, I want you to take it, and like I want you to be able to give this gift to someone. Like, you are worthy of having it be received. Like, I want you to have it be received. I wish I could have done it. I wanted it to be me, but it didn't work. And
you said,
please take it and
right.
find
and you were almost
that.
like, it would be selfish of me to keep taking your love,
right?
When I can't give it back. And so I remember you said, like, please take it from my trembling hands.
Right.
Like, not that I didn't adore it and appreciate it, but I just couldn't give it back to you.
Right.
And so just know I'm really grateful for all those years that you gave me.
Right.
I'm sorry. And to just realize, like, he didn't love me like that. And I almost got to the point where it's like, okay, do I love myself enough to realize I deserve to be loved too, and we both deserve that. And so it's time for me to move on. Like, it's time for me to not love him in a romantic way, but to love him as a friend. And I feel like we are now what we were always supposed to be.
Yeah.
Our relationship is what it always should have been, which is really, really good friends. But we don't have that burden that we were carrying.
Absolutely. I do also, though, want to say that even in our situation, which was very eyes wide open, low, like no betrayal between us, betrayal maybe from church, incentivized, like from the outset, to stay in the same household, like all things basically like indicating that we want to and intend to like remain close, be good to each other, etc. There were some months that during the months that you were having to like you were having to break up with me. Mm-hmm. And when you break up with someone, things get dicey.
This is exactly the territory I wanted to get into as well. This is the real and hard part of this. Mm-hmm. And both of you, each of you being therapists.
Sure.
I think we, and those who are listening to this podcast who are in a similar situation.
Yeah.
Myself and my ex-wife included, had to get to the point where there had to be a very real break. Mm-hmm. And there had to be a separation of what was normal and consistent. And I know we're kind of leading into that. So explain through your situation and through your experience how you broke that relationship, how you made that separation.
The first thing is that I kicked him out of the bed.
It's true.
I was like, I can't have you be sleeping in the bed anymore.
Like, you went and talked to your supervisor for therapy, supervisor, but you know, like, therapists have to be processing their own stuff, basically, you know. So she's talking about this, and your supervisor was like, maybe some boundaries.
Yes.
You know, like, she was like, because you're in it and you haven't thought it through yet, and like, but yeah, so you came home and it was like, okay, like, separate rooms.
And I can't have you hugging me right now.
Right.
Like, we can't do the things we used to do together, like, anymore.
Right.
Like,
so we stopped watching shows.
Yeah.
We had a period where there was really low contact
Yeah.
between us, other than just co-parenty stuff. I was gone on the weekend every other week.
yeah,
Were we
switched
switching then?
weekends.
Yeah. Every other weekend, one of us would be gone.
And also, you were working Mondays and Tuesdays pretty late.
Right, and I was doing Global too.
And
so
yeah,
I was
he was very
busy at work at that
And then
time.
I was working Wednesday, Thursday,
Right.
and then we were not together on the weekends. So we kind of didn't see each other a
did not
ton
see each
during
other
that
a bunch.
time.
And
but
I remember feeling really clearly because part of her love language is like acts of service, and so I remember realizing very clearly, like, I don't expect you to like do my laundry, you know, things that had just been part of the arrangement. Like, I was like, I'm going to go ahead and like do my own thing here, and also like don't feel like you have to cook for me, which you ended up like being like, well, I mean, if I'm making food, I'm just like gonna make enough for you too. But like anything that would have made her feel, I just was envisioning, because I know how her brain works because we've been together for so long. I'm like, anything that formerly would have been like, I'm doing this with love, you know, I didn't want her to have to be doing it with the pain of former love. And
right,
so
yeah. So we didn't. I was like, fine.
Yeah.
You do your own laundry
That's right.
then. Except for I need to do your whites still because I can't see you mixing them.
She couldn't handle the
mix
way
your
I do
darks
it.
with your
like,
whites.
I'm like codependent. No, it's fine. Like, yeah. It was, so
Yeah, so
there
it
were
was
like very
boundaries that we
clear
had to-
boundaries that we had to establish.
Yeah.
And enact. And then the other thing that was would happen a lot is like, kind of what you were talking about in the talk today, where the straight narrative, like, there was so much sympathy coming her way from everyone. And like, while she was in this phase of breaking up with me, one of the stages of separation or loss is anger. And you did a very good job, I think, of like not taking it to like an extreme, but like, you know, I had to get very comfortable with the idea that she was having conversations with people that we both knew and love that were like not super, how would I phrase it? She was talking, you know, like she was, I don't know.
I was
like,
processing
You were
through
processing through these complex
hurts.
feelings and the hurts, and I was not your favorite person.
Did it make you feel vulnerable? Did you,
Yes,
Did you
profoundly.
Did you
yeah.
feel inferior or?
I at different points felt inferior, not specifically around this. Like, what I felt was voiceless. I felt very voiceless. So anybody that we both knew that would talk to either of us would be deeply resonating with anything she had to say. And it's not that I was necessarily even wanting to counter her narrative so much as like, we're both humans, you know, like we both are in this thing, you know, and so.
I think that's when I was like, oh, this is my straight privilege.
That's
coming
right.
out.
That's exactly right.
Because everyone was feeling sorry for me because most of them were all straight. So they're like, oh, and they could see it from their own straight point of view. And so I got a lot of people wanting to make Josh the villain.
Right.
Me
Which is
the victim.
so tempting when you're mad, if you're feeling anger,
Oh,
rightful
yeah.
anger, and they're like, can you believe whatever? And like,
Right.
I'm sure there were moments that I would understand if there were moments where those conversations were happening and like kind of going that direction, you know?
I had to be very methodical in who I talked to about my concerns and my frustrations, and I also had to be methodical about defending him.
Right.
and making sure that people were like, oh, he's so selfish, and be like, no, that we made this decision together, like, or they would say things like, well, he has his agency and now he's,
gonna reap the rewards.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't think he's going to hell, like,
Right.
And so that was kind of, I felt like something I had to do, like, be as a straight person, was to stand up for him. And
yeah, it eventually got, like, it was a process, but eventually it got to where that was, like, advocacy was happening. And that was but when it got to that point, I was feeling much
But before I got to that point, there was some anger.
Right.
Because for one, like, you were dating. I wasn't to the point where I could date yet because I was still getting over him. Like, it was still painful. And so, like...
So super easy to be like, and he's out.
Yeah, like, it would have been... I knew it would have been so easy for me to garner, like, such sympathy if I were like, can you believe Josh what he's doing right now? He's out at a gay bar and like
and I'm here with a girl.
And like, I could have spun it so easily,
yeah,
and like just entered right back into that sweet spot of Mormonism where I'm like, I'm gonna go find my straight man, we're gonna get married in the temple, and
you ride off on the white horse of victimhood,
right,
where you can vilify Josh. Which I think this is like a really great topic that you're talking about, something that relates to so many people who are listening to this podcast, because I saw this in my divorce as well, where immediately the population who were closer to my wife were so quick to say, oh, he did this and this and this, and so I see why you had to divorce him.
Yep.
They wanted the story, they wanted the juicy details, but there was such a desire and an appetite to create a victim, to say, oh, I'm so sorry for the straight spouse, all the awful things, and then on my side of it say, well, I can't believe you lived through that and how difficult that was, and I'm saying, hold on, we had a wonderful relationship, and she's not a victim, she's not, she also didn't hurt me, like, so I understand so much of this. And I think this is also good territory to say, if you are going through a divorce, be kind.
Yeah. I think that oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Just be kind and allow this relationship to be, sometimes I like to look at this like the house of cards, where you have 52, everyone has 52 cards to deal and to use. And you can disassemble those cards one at a time and put them back in a box. You may not choose to reuse those cards ever again, but attached with those cards are memories and happiness and experiences as part of that relationship that are meaningful and special. And some of those were disaster cards, jokers, cards that just contained instructions, cards that really didn't do anything for you. And that's one way of disassembling the relationship. The other way is blowing it up. At the end of the day, you have 52 cards of confetti to clean up today or tomorrow or 10 years down the road. At the end of the day, there's always 52 cards, and there will always be 2 opportunities to methodically disassemble the house of cards or blow it up and clean up every piece of confetti down the road. But one is much easier, and one is much more dangerous.
Really painful.
Very painful. And so I think this is a great discussion in terms of not labeling each other as a he said, she said, or this side, that side, but just to understand and see the situation for what it is.
I think that, like, the part of what we learned in this process was that there can be some intentionality around it. Like, we were kind of definitely like going at it and figuring it out as we went. And there were moments where it felt really scary at certain moments, because it was like, we no longer have the bond of marriage guaranteeing we were gonna hang. We were very devoted to each other as friends, and obviously once certain things were worked through, there was we're thick as thieves once again. But like during this particular moment, there was a high level of vulnerability, especially for me, as the risk for the gay person was that she would go with the majority of our friends, or the majority, with the majority, because most people are straight. So the majority of the people that would empathize with her, and then I would be left very much needing to completely build a new infrastructure, which these things were needs regardless. But like, anyway, with a higher level of intentionality and with a framework around what's happening, which we kind of intuited at the time, but I have a little bit more clarity on now. It's if you are somebody that is going through a divorce, especially, I would not speak to the divorce in general within these terms, but divorces related to mixed orientation marriage, like, I think viewing it as a grief process and viewing it as a stages of grief process, and viewing the spouse that is having to detach as somebody that's viewing it from like they're going to go through an anger phase and like talking it through, like how will you go, being intentional about how you will go through the anger phase, who you will talk to, how you will legitimately express that anger, which it's real. Like that was what was so scary, is that anger's real.
And the kids, like,
yes.
How were you going to tell your kids?
What will the narrative with the kids be?
That's a big one. I never wanted our kids to feel like Josh was not choosing the right, and that was, I just...
You never instilled in them a narrative of me being a bad guy and you being a victim and them also being complicit in the victimhood. And I think the thing that I would say about that framework is that if you are able to do that and able to, as you were saying, not blow it up or whatever, it does end, right? Like the feelings get processed, and then there comes a day where you're able to like look at each other, which is what happened with us. Like eventually we were able to look at each other once again, and it was like, hey, like, you're back, and you were able to see me as the best friend that I had always been. And really, like you were saying a few minutes ago, a restoration to what this relationship kind of should have always been.
Right.
And like, I think with a lot of mixed orientation marriages, the thing that is the bedrock is a really cool friendship that it would be a shame to lose. And so I would love to give some hope that certainly not everybody's story will end in ways where that is a possibility, and I would never want anybody to feel any level of shame if that didn't end up being the case for them, right? But kind of I do think there's hope for that friendship to survive and really thrive, as long as there's a little bit of framework and mutual patience given around like what the straight spouse is having to do. Because really what the straight spouse is having to do is the worst. Like, we all know breakups are the worst. Like, breakups are the worst, and they're having to like fully do a breakup.
Yeah, when it comes to the divorcing in a mixed orientation marriage, it is.
Yeah, when I say the worst, I just meant that like more colloquially. Sorry, I didn't mean to like actually compare like what is worse, being gay or but like it is a really sucky thing to have to do.
Because like you said, his love for me didn't have to change at all.
Right.
Essentially, he was like, I love you just the way...
same, almost exactly the same as I always have.
Yeah, because you said, I love you just as much as I always have. And I was like, and I love you less.
Totally. And we're both like, good. Oh, that's so wonderful.
I love you in a different way now.
Totally. But as it always should have been. And so... and the other part of that for me was like, because I was staying in the house, a lot of the straight narrative around it, like a lot of the funny business I started getting was like straight people trying to come to me and be like, you need to leave her alone. Like, you need to let her grieve. Why are you so selfishly staying in that place with your children that it's like we had mutually decided that this was what was best for our family, and people kept coming in and being like, that's wrong, that's not going to work, she'll never be able to let you go. Again, very much centered on the straight experience and on the straight narrative, and I think it's understandable, but it was very complicated for me to be able to be, I was kind of like, I mean, at one point I had to pull you aside and ask you just to make sure. I was like, what do you think? Is this, and like, And that was at that time where there was anger. So like sometimes those narratives were like maybe you are horrible for being here. You know, not really. You never actually said that. But like deep down, we finally got to like brass tacks, and you were like, no, this is what we're supposed to do, and this is what I you know, she always knew that I would do anything she wanted me to do, and vice versa. And so if she had ever asked me to exit, I would have. But anyway, that was an interesting component to like, well, it's kind of ended up being what you were saying with your mom, where you had that conversation with her where it was like, see, Mom, like, because she had some feeling, like, well, I hope I didn't just fully throw her under the bus, but like, you know, your family's gonna have some feelings, and so it, where you were like, wasn't it like, he can never win, like.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I was like, win.
Mom, what is it that you want Josh to do?
Right.
You know, what is the thing that you want? Like, do you want him to just leave and abandon me and then I'll be a single mom?
Right.
Or do you want him to stay and treat me kindly? No matter what he does, it's not.
Like I stay and it's like, you're horrible for staying. And if I were to leave, it'd be like, you left them. You know, it's like, there's
never
really
win.
no win.
Yeah. And she was
no
like,
winning.
you're right. But with my mom being frustrated, it was just because she wanted me to be able to move on.
Totally.
Because she was like, I am not mad you're getting a divorce. I don't blame Josh for going and finding happiness. I just want you to be happy, and I worry that you won't be able to be happy with him living in the house. And that's what everybody's concerned. Like, how are you supposed to move on when he's living in the house, you know?
Which, P.S., we managed it just fine. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but we made it through, you know,
No,
so
it was
trust yourselves,
right.
You know, trust what you deep down know to be true for yourselves.
Because maybe that's going to be different for different people. But to
absolutely.
Just trust what's right for you. And
I think that opens up the very two important questions of this podcast interview. Have you moved on, and is there happiness in your individual experiences?
Yes and yes. You?
Well, Josh has found an amazing person who I personally love.
Right.
Oh no. Podcast or blog post number 4.
All right. Here we go.
Straight spouse loves former gay spouse's spouse.
No, like
We
Carlos.
really are a unicorn.
I remember on Carlos's birthday, texting him like, "You're the best boyfriend of a gay ex-husband a girl could ask for." Like, because I feel like he has added to our family, like not taken away. Like his presence there is amazing, and I am sad like when Carlos goes home.
It's true.
You know, so you have found that love. I am dating.
It materialized much more quickly than I anticipated. Like, in fact, I was like looking forward to like really putting myself on the market, because I was like had a picture of the back of my head as my profile, and just was very like covert about it because we hadn't published the post yet. So I was thinking like, well, hey, we'll finally publish the post. I'll go to a real profile, do the real dating profile. Do the real dating thing. OkCupid was the only one I ever ended up using. Because it was like felt like a holding pattern before I could really do the thing, and then like Carlos materialized from that, and like I was very wary of people connected to Mormonism at the time, and he wasn't like his thing was like Buddhist, like a bunch of things that I'm like, I don't know if this would even be a fit, but it ended up obviously being a fit. But like when I learned early on that he had some Mormon history, you know, because he converted to the church as a late teen and went on a mission, I was like, there was a moment where I went to Lolly and I was like, this guy, because we didn't want the information about our divorce to spread before we posted the post. And I was like, this guy is connected to Mormonism. Do you think I should like, just like not pursue it at all? And anyway, I ended up moving forward with it. But yeah, so.
In like a 1-minute answer, was he aware of your situation?
He was not. I like sent him I was like, hey, I have to do this big reveal thing, because that was so annoying. Every time I dated, I would have to be like, people would be like, what's up with the back of the head? They were like, I got so much traction with that profile.
I have to admit, that would be the oddest.
I'm sure people
Most
are
of
like,
those are like
pretty face,
yep,
pretty
yep.
face, pretty face, pretty
Back of head.
Back of the head, kind of intriguing little synopsis. Who are you?
Intriguing little. I wouldn't even give an intriguing little. Okay,
Right?
he's not out. Never mind.
Right.
Like,
Oh, you would have gone. No, I got tons of reaction. It was so weird. I was expecting no one to respond. And
from
that,
here on
like,
out,
my
everybody,
future
you're going to see
partner.
backs of heads,
I
photos.
know. I was like waiting for like that to happen, but yeah. So like, it was always this big moment of reveal, and like some guys were like, "Well, catch you later. This is way too much," but other people could hang with it. But yeah. So when I told Carlos, I was like, "So Josh Weed," and he's like, "I don't know who that is," and it was very relieving. I was like, "Good." That made that he had been out of the church for so long. He had no real awareness.
Had to be a great opportunity to. I mean, that's a great foundation to begin on.
Yeah, it
was a more authentic experience.
perfect. It was perfect.
So Josh is dating. Josh seems
So, yeah,
happy.
that's my deal.
Lolly.
What's up?
Yes, 6 months after we decided to separate, then I started feeling like, okay, I think now maybe I need to start dating in order for my heart to kind of move on. And I know it's different for everybody, but that was when it felt right for me. So I got on some dating sites, and the first date that I went on and the first date that I kissed someone, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like,
Your previous track record of 2 gay guys
Yeah.
was just trumped by
Did
one
not
terrible straight man
compare.
kisser, but it was amazing.
Right.
Totally.
I remember telling him, I was like, well, I've never kissed a straight guy. And he was like, well, I'm straight. I'm like, yeah, you're the first person I've kissed. And he was like, oh, okay.
After the kiss, that's
Swipe,
so
he's
funny.
swiping.
That is so funny. He's like, oh, I just did that for you. You're welcome. That's awesome.
Thank you, Joel.
That's right. I remember him.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've just been going through,
Dating around.
been dating around. Yeah.
Seeing certain people more seriously than others.
But and then there's been times where I'm like, is this what straight guys are? Like, where's my sensitivity? And I was like, oh well, I still have Josh.
That's right.
So
In the end, this has been a pretty remarkable experience. This began long before 2012, and there's a lot of history behind the Weeds story prior to 2012 and the blog post. But as the world has fairly and unfairly watched your story unfold, we get to where we're at today. And ultimately, was it worth it? In your opinions, given all of the ups and downs of this relationship and the experience,
Was marriage worth it?
Was marriage worth it?
Yes. Because the answer to that is very connected to the whole cosmic thing. And so, like,
well, I mean, there's the obvious thing of I would never trade our girls. Like, our family's not a mistake. I'm so grateful for the friendship.
yeah.
I am a better person because of Josh.
Oh, I'm like, right, you are. No, I feel the same way about you.
I have a better understanding of people and more compassion, and I don't regret it. If I had to go back and redo it, I would still do it.
I know I would, because it was direct. It felt very, I know that's such a cheesy answer, and I know some people don't sit very well with it, but it really was a cosmic thing for me. And so, like, I can say, the almost total certainty, because of the way it happened, I would do it again. And yeah, like, life-changing. I mean, Lolly saved me in many ways. Like, she saw who I was before I could see who I was. She, like, she prepared me for my ability to really find the person that I love now. And, like, and the family we've created is beautiful, and it continues forward, and I kind of just love our family. Like, and I love what it has become. There's sometimes I look around and I'm like Carlos walks in our house, and I'm like, what even is happening right now? Like, I'm still, because our family system still feels very similar. And then Carlos is there, and I'm like, wow, how lucky am I that this is like working in this way, this very, very beautiful way, and that there's even room for more, like as you assimilate someone into the family system, and there's not less, there's more. Like, this has not diminished our family, this has augmented our family. And not that, so heck yeah, I'm loving it. Like, I think it's awesome.
Like a puzzle, as each of these pieces fit into their respective places, the picture becomes
clear. Yeah.
And more understandable.
That's right.
Any last words, thoughts, as we've dissected your world and given society more than they deserve in terms of disclosure of what's happening with the weeds? But I do appreciate the candid discussion, because I think there's a very real quest for understanding how your story unfolds. Not because it was the viral sensation of the weeds story, but there are people out there who are desperate for hope.
Yeah.
There are people out there who are in mixed orientation marriages who are saddened by the thought of divorce, who believe that if we choose to divorce, either the sky falls, the institutional message of religion no longer will apply, or we defy that narrative. What is your message to those who look from the outside in and contemplate this world, contemplate even moving forward with a divorce from their mixed orientation marriage?
I would say that for me, I am happier than I was. Like, that I feel at peace with our relationship now. Like I said, we are now what we're always meant to be, which is best friends. And I don't carry that huge weight. Because mixed orientation marriage, there's a huge weight that you carry around. And I don't have that weight that I carry around anymore. And yeah, I'm still looking for a person, but I have hope. Like,
yeah, like you're not at a loss with dates.
And I think one of the best things has been seeing Josh be really happy. Like how beautiful that was, and that I truly love him. And so to see him becoming self-actualized and being happy and finding love is beautiful, and it's relieving, because honestly there were times where I felt like I was the reason that he wasn't able to be happy, because
you were the thing standing in my way, which wasn't real, but like it's a real feeling. Way. Yeah.
So just having gone through it, it was worth it. It was very scary and heartbreaking and nightmarish at times, but I am so grateful to be where I am now.
For sure. And my answer is really similar. I was just commenting, like, airports. When we were married, whenever I went to I don't know if it was like wanderlust or what it was, but like in an airport, there was always like this kind of desire to like, I would find myself looking at guys at an like that's where that would like surface, where I was just like, there was a burden, and it was like really profound and deep, and I wasn't paying attention to it, but it was like I had not honored a real part of myself. And so I was thinking about this because we were just at the airport, and it was the two of us and Carlos, and I did not feel any burden. Like, it was like full, I felt very like whole, and not like there was some gnawing primal something inside of me. And what a difference that is. And so kind of when you were talking about like, I feel so much happier so much more contented and so much more like wholehearted in the Brene Brown terms, or like so much more like congruent, and just things are right. And things are more right now than they were then. And so, yeah, I guess that's the message. And also just maybe not be afraid of this step. Like maybe people in a mixed orientation marriage is like, I know that there was some sensitivity, especially when we are talking to a straight audience, as we did in our divorce post, about like, stop recommending mixed orientation marriage to people. We we should. We were the prime example of how it quote unquote would be able to work, and it does not work. Believe us when we say, stop putting this out as something people should do. To people in a mixed orientation message, that particular kind of phraseology and message, even though it wasn't intended for them, I felt like, I don't want to speak for them, but I could see in feedback that it was felt like we were trying to slam them or say that their marriages were a sham or something like that. And I guess what I'm saying is like, everybody's story is unique, and we honor that uniqueness, and no point would, just like before, we would never look at anybody and say like, you're doing it wrong. Like, nor we would not do that now. But I would say that I would, for in general, in mixed orientation marriage, like, I would want people to, as they are assessing their lives, maybe consider this as one of the options, especially if things get dicey or start feeling a certain way. Consider divorce, drastic as that sounds, as like a real possibility for how things can work, and even still in some cases remain familial, or maybe even just be worth it in order to find authenticity. So I don't know if that made sense.
I think it makes wonderful sense in terms of understanding the importance of progression.
Right.
And I think your story alone is evidence that if you want to remain stagnant, you can maintain the status quo.
Right.
Not always easy, not always happy, not always the best or most favorable of experiences.
But maybe that's your call. But maybe that's what you're supposed to do.
Maybe that's what works.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you're open, I completely understand that.
Right.
If you're open to taking that to the next level, progressing it, or allowing it to evolve, we shouldn't be afraid to say the word divorce.
Right. And in our case, has led to incredible amounts of joy and good things.
And I testify it happened in my relationship as well.
Yeah.
That was part, and I know of others who have similar experiences. And not all mimicked each other, but the elements were the same.
Sure.
And I appreciate the grief pattern, the anger, the coming back together again, the reevaluation and the reassociation of feelings. But then from there, we do move on. And happiness. Unfortunately, when we get to where we begin talking about religion, and I don't want to, because we're at the end of the podcast, but we say, and we discussed this earlier on, and I had a therapist 3 years ago ask me if he believed, he asked me if I believed that there were spiritual experiences that came to gay people, and if I believed that was the truth. And I had a hard time answering yes. Stuck in that religious message, thinking that everything on this side of the aisle was, there was nothing spiritual or happy about the authentic side of homosexuality or non-straight experiences.
Right.
And I had a really hard time believing that could be the case, that I indeed could find happiness.
Yeah.
And I think your story is evidence that happiness exists even on that side of the aisle.
Totally.
Even after divorce, and mine and others as well. I think that's the message. So many people who are listening to this just want hope.
Right.
They also want the path to be a little smoother.
Totally, with good reason.
And I think stories like yours help to remove the boulders from the path.
Yeah,
And in time, the path becomes paved.
that's right.
And there will be lines painted, so it makes it a little easier. But we have children. Our children deserve that relationship to continue as well.
Right.
It's true.
And that's back to that confetti experience. It's one thing to create collateral damage for yourself, but when you start talking divorce, especially with children, we have littles that are involved as well.
Absolutely.
And that's why this is an important message.
So true.
Well, this might be our longest podcast so far.
Sorry.
Not even-
long-winded.
We're talkers.
We are.
Not even a reason for apology, because I think we've covered a lot of area
Yeah,
and
for sure.
talked about a lot of things. Thank you.
Yeah, no, our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
So thankful for the opportunity to sit down, and I know as vulnerable as it is, and as it's not even your responsibility to give the world an update, but I do think it was good. It's good to see that the weeds are happy
Yeah.
and moving on.
Absolutely. We're
Um,
happy to report it.
Yay! And I look forward to all the other great things. And Lolly, we'll watch for you on your
The
dating sites.
Okay, yeah.
Right. Keep your eyes open.
Thanks.
She's available as of the
That's
date
right.
of this recording, which is exciting.
Hit her up.
All right, you two, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been another episode of Latter Gay Stories podcast. Again, a super fascinating episode as we have discussed this intersection of sexuality and reality as it plays out in each of our individual journeys. If you're following this podcast on one of the audio versions, we invite you to subscribe to this channel. If you're listening on Google Play, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or one of the others. And also, if you're catching this podcast on the video version through our YouTube channel, we invite you to make a comment, share this video, like it, and let us know what you think. And if you are watching on Facebook, we invite you to join into the conversation below and share your thoughts about the weeds journey, how that applies or impacts your personal life, and let's have an online real-time discussion about the topics that we've discussed today. Again, the Latter Gay Story podcast is our opportunity to inspect the intersection of LDS Street and LGBTQ Avenue as we continue writing our own Latter Gay Stories.